In our next learning moment, lesson number 2, we're going to focus on yet another, a third approach to doing master detail pages, right? So I just want to quickly review, recall back to last term, we did do something that actually truthfully was an implementation of master detail, and that we had, for example, here in our job bank, we would have the applicant details at the top of the page, and then showing underneath the details, we had two different sets of related data documents for this. It could be their resumes, cover letters that they've uploaded, and so on. And then a list of the different applications in the job bank that this applicant has submitted an application to, and so on, right? So that's an example of a basic master detail page that we did last term, right? And to accomplish that, let me just bring up Visual Studio again here. Remember what we did is we just, in the top portion of the page, we put all the typical details information, first name, middle name, last name, all the properties of the applicant. And then right under it, we showed, because we included, let me remind you of that, I'll go back to the controller. In the model for this, we pulled the one applicant, but we included everything but the kitchen sink here. We got all the applicant documents, all of the applications that they've applied to, and so on. So that was all included in the model for the page. So that made it possible for us to go through the model's applicant documents, the model's applications, and just show that related information right on the one page. So a good implementation, a basic, but a good one. I should maybe have mentioned before I close that you can clearly see how easy it would be to even expand on it a little further with something like, let me get it back up here. Even like a bootstrap collapse or something, right? So each of these you could have collapse, so you just expand, the one you want. Even do like the accordion using the bootstrap collapse approach, so that you would only have one, like say the documents expanded, and you click a different one, that one closes, and the next grouping of child records shows up. So there's lots of functionality that you can add to this as well. But for now, let's go on to our third, right? Just to quickly relate back, the big one we did, our first lesson for this term, was when the details that we're concerned or focused on is a very large and perhaps important collection of data, so much so that we want to be able to filter it, maybe sort it, and page through it, right? There's just too much to show all at once, so we need to page it, and we might want to filter and search for given records and so on. The example we did was all the appointments that will accumulate over time in the medical history for a given patient, right? And so what we did here, the focus of this, it was a fair bit of work, right? But the focus was that the model for the page itself would be that IEnumerable collection of the detailed records, right? In our case, we did the uh, appointments of the patient, right? And with that in place, we could still bring in the master record as a strongly typed object, so we can take advantage of all the metadata that came with the class for the object and have that at the top of the page. But it made it easy for us to use our techniques that we've learned for sorting, filtering, and paging, and easily incorporate as well that return URL approach. So we could separately keep track of and return to, whether it's the patient index with the last filter, paging, whatever that we had set up there, as well as, of course, working within the detail records themselves, maintaining all of that sorting, filtering, and paging information. So that was a big job, but when you have a lot of important related data that you're really focusing on, that is probably the best single implementation for master detail pages. However, our third approach then, if that's really not the focus, right? But instead, what are facing is when we have lots of different related data to show, right? Lots of different things in relation to the master. One of the nice things that we could do is use partial views with Bootstrap tabs. Tabs, people love tabs. They make for a great user experience, right? And what we can do is with a little bit of code, we can actually load the related data using a partial view very easily when the tab is requested, clicked on, right? And that way we aren't loading all the related data, pulling it all from the database at once, loading it all into the data being sent down to the browser, even if they're only going to look at one piece of related information, right? Why not leave the rest until you actually need it? Okay, so it's a very good uh, UI design approach. It's very satisfying to the user and also reduces tremendously the amount of data that you might be bringing down, pulling out of the database and transmitting. All right, so it's a very good approach, and it's going to be the last real one that we're going to focus on for master details, this third approach. But I think you'll enjoy it. It's a lot of fun. So what I have is a copy paste file that I'll use with the last version, even the version where we've already done our work with the uh, that first master detail lesson, okay, where we left off. So as I said, this will depend on Bootstrap tabs. So I've got the link here to the documentation in the official Bootstrap site. Okay. For tabs, by the way, you can change quickly and easily. In fact, it's one very quick change between sort of the tab look across the top and if you like these pills, as they call them, whether it's, they look more like buttons, right? It's kind of immaterial, but there's lots of documentation here. I'll let you read through that on your own. Okay, we'll just see how we're going to implement it here. So I have this file open in my own browser. Sorry, not browser, but in my own window here on the other screen, so I can copy and paste easily from it. Okay, so you can follow along, but what I also have open and ready is the last version of Visual Studio that we did. By the way, I should maybe mention I did a couple quick things at the end. Notice here, of course, we had scaffolded some of the pages from the identity system. So here's our login page. So to save me from having to type logins all the time, I put in here values, okay, for the input for the email and the one for the password, right? Just so I don't have to type them in. The other thing I did, I mentioned it in my comments, is inside the patient class itself, um, I added this new we already had age here, right? But I've added this new age summary just because in my details page there, I found it nice to show the date of birth behind the actual age, so you get both pieces of information. But the problem was because it's a nullable field date of birth, I was just getting empty brackets. So a nice centralized way to do that is add a new summary property here. So if there is nothing in age, right, it's just white space, then I'll just show some like not available, right? Otherwise, I've returned age and then formatted date as well. Okay, so that's just mentioning the couple quick changes I made. All right, let's get down to it now. So what we're going to focus on is currently right now on the doctor details page, we have, well, nothing, right? We haven't added any particular new features to it whatsoever. So let me just quickly show you that and why I thought it was a good one to play around with to show you this third technique, right? So if I come to doctors, yeah, sure, we can edit, we can assign new specialties and so on. But in terms of details, well, let's think about it. What related information is there? Well, obviously, there's all those specialties. We might want to see that full list of specialties. How about what patients at the medical office are uh, this doctor is the primary care physician for which patients and so on. And you can probably come up with more things as well, but that's what we're going to start with, right? Of course, we should show all the actual properties of the doctor. Now, I know this is kind of a poor example that way because everything is actually right here in terms of showing you that. Okay. All right. So let's, documents as well. That's something else we could add, but we'll see if we get that far. All right. So what we're going to start off with I'm going to add, first of all, partial views, right? So remember what a partial view is. We've done some work with them before, right? We added some here in the shared. For example, our login, oh, sorry, that wasn't ours. The page size modal, right? Just because we use the exact same code in multiple pages, okay? We added that here as a partial view. And that's even called from our paging nav bar, right? So this gives us that consistent navigation bar wherever we're using pages. So those are a couple of examples of partial views. Some partial views can be strongly typed, but they don't have to be. So we're going to create a partial view for each and every, uh, excuse me, um, piece of related child data, related detail for a doctor, right? Now, you can just put all your partial views in the shared folder, but it will also look for them in the actual um, view folder itself. So these are all related to doctor. So I'm going to put them in here. If I right click, I can just add a view. It will be just an empty view. And I'm going to name it. Oh, I have an extra space there. Underscore, that's our naming convention, list of specialties, right? So here we're just going to show all the specialties for a given doctor. Now, this is an example then of a partial view that will be strongly typed. Okay, so it's based on an IEnumerable collection of doctors' specialties, right? And it's just a snippet of HTML, okay, with this description list where we have a for each loop showing the names of all the specialties with the BR tag afterwards. So not that much to it, right? But let's add another one. Let's add one for each of the um, related child records collections that we're going to do. So the next one will be my list of patients. Right? And so here there's a little bit more code to this one, but not that much more. It's basically the same idea. I'll start with an IEnumerable collection of patient objects, okay? And it's just, again, using our description list for the layout to be consistent with how it looks in the overall UI. And we have lists of patients and then a little table just showing the patient and then the age with date of birth. Hey, there's a chance to use again my new age summary property that I put in. So we're going to show the full name and the age summary. And notice we're making this a link, right, to actually go to the index of our new patient appointment controller. That was that other master detail page where we passed the patient ID, okay? So we can then go to that and see all the details for a given patient directly from this list. Okay, so that's all that we have inside each of these separate partial views. Okay, so I'm just going to close them for now, unclutter the screen a little. All right, so that's what we're going to show on the page. How are we going to get it there? Well, for one thing, those both were strongly typed partial views. They require data, right? So we need to, in our controller, so I'll use the doctor's controller, we need to add some actions here to provide data to those partial views and to return the partial view itself, right? So I'm just going to shrink everything down, go near the bottom. Okay, I could be, I'm going to do it right here after download. So I'm just going to put my code in place from the copy paste file, and we'll have a quick look at it here. Okay, so these actions, okay, can be called from the client. We're actually going to call them using basically a JavaScript or an AJAX call, right? So we'll call for a partial view result. Okay, that's what this returns, a snippet of HTML, a partial view, right? So if we ask for a list of specialty details, notice we're passing a parameter. Well, that parameter is used to identify the doctor, right? The master record or parent record in the parent-child relationship, okay? So we're just going to get all the doctor's specialties, including specialties, so we can have the name available, ordering it by the name, okay? And then when we say return partial view, we specify the name of the partial view, and then our query, okay, we just to list it, and that passes that as the model, the data for the model itself. And that's it, okay? We have another one for the list of patient details, so we'll just go to patients where the doctor ID matches. We just want all the patients for the one doctor, right? Ordering by the last name and first name, and we'll show the, we'll return the partial view with that as the data for the model of the partial view itself. Okay, so kind of neat seeing this partial view result is designed to give the data, and we can do this in the background with just an AJAX call. Now, so we have to do some work on the doctor details view itself. So let me get that up. I'll just save changes so far. Wouldn't hurt to do a build. Never hurts to do a build once in a while and make sure that, especially when I'm copying and pasting, right? There we go. Okay. All right, so let's come down to the views for doctor, and let's go to the details view. So right now it's still as it was initially scaffolded, right? Not much to it at all. Okay. Uh, so I'm going to fix that up a little bit at the very least, right? Let me just make a couple quick changes here. Just at the top, instead of just saying details, let's say, okay, details, and I'll show the doctor the full name in a nice, fairly good size heading at the top with a horizontal rule underneath. All right. So instead of just showing this, although I'm actually going to incorporate that, you'll see it will reappear, but just so I don't get messed up in my copy paste, I'm going to remove the rest for now. It actually will be reappearing in the page shortly. But first, what I'm going to have is I need a div. And then the first thing I'm going to put inside is the definition of the tabs, right? So this is an unordered list that actually defines or creates the little tabs across the top, right? So the class is nav tabs, okay? And I have three. I have basic, patients, okay? Oh, sorry. I should refer here to the names, okay? Basic, patients, and specialties, right? Now, this is the href, and those will correspond to, notice the pound sign means the ID. So I'm going to use these for the IDs of the actual tabs themselves, right? The tab panels will have these IDs. So when I click patients, right, and that's the text, of course, I'm showing here, okay, basic details, patients, and specialties. And you can add more if you need more record sets and so on, right? So that defines, with that unordered list, the tabs across the top. Then we add the tab panes. All right. So underneath the little tabs themselves, the tab panes then, okay, these are the ones that the ID, okay, matches these hrefs up here. So basic, we call this one. But notice already that this is considered the active, okay? This is the active tab, right? And it's shown here as well. Okay, so each of these is a tab panel, okay? And so on it, we can put whatever HTML we want, right? So I just have here my description list, okay? And I basically have the first name, middle name, last name. So this is the data that more or less was already here on the page when we started, right? So that it's already loaded. It's passed as the actual model itself. So I might as well just have that here already shown, already active, showing this as the actual details. Okay, so let's add more panels though. I need one for each, for patients, an ID one for specialties. Now these are pretty well empty, right? Right, so I have the panels here, but there's nothing in them yet. That's what I said. We aren't going to go and pull all this other data in unless we actually select that tab. Unless we choose to see the data for these other tabs, I don't even bother going and getting it from the database, let alone showing it on the actual screen. All right, so I can take out that. Now, what I would do next is just for some consistency, I'm going to throw another horizontal rule so that it kind of matches the one at the top. And then there's my usual buttons, okay? Now, I'm not going to, there's no sorting, filtering, or paging on the doctor index, at least not at this point. So just going back to the index is fine, right? And edit just allows to go and edit the doctor. No big deal there. Okay, so to make the rest work and actually go and get these partial views and populate these other tabs with the data, what we need to do is add some JavaScript. Right now, there is no scripts section yet. Okay, so we're going to add that. And we're going to use this specialized Ajax request dot load. Dot load is a method that's just perfect for this situation, right? So let me add this little bit of code here, and we'll talk about it. Okay. All right, so basically the dot, of course, means a class. So all the little tabs across the top, okay, notice the class is navlink, right? So whenever we click any of the tabs, we will cause this event to happen, a dot navlink click event, right? So what do we want to do in that case? Well, we'll run this function. We'll grab the active tab. Now, this is why I use the name attribute, right? We can't use ID because the tab panels have these IDs, but I added names here, okay? Basic, patient, and specialties. And that allows me to then in my code say, okay, what's the name of the actual nav tab that I just clicked, right? The nav link that I clicked. So that would be my active tab, and I can just do a switch here. So if it happened to be patients, okay, then I'm going to just populate the actual tab panel, the ID patients, with .load. And .load, all I have to do is pass the URL of where it's supposed to get some HTML to show. So this comes from our controller, the doctor's controller, list of patient details. That action, that partial view will be returned. We just pass in the model.id, which is of course the ID of the doctor. Same thing for specialties. We go and we get that partial view. And of course, by passing this ID, it will actually go and get the data, all the list of specialties or list of patients, whatever the case may be, right? We don't have to do one for the default tab, right? The built-in Bootstrap will just look after showing that tab. The data is already there. It was there when we first loaded the page. Okay, so that's really all it takes. Let's actually just give that a try here. I'm going to go Control F5. Just log in. And if we go to Doctors, go to Details, here we go. So here's my tab. So they're my basic details, the information I initially had on here. I can click Patients, and of course this will go and get, okay, the actual data is pulled from the database. It creates the partial view and puts it here in the tab panel, right? So here's my list of patients. You notice these will actually take me to, right, the details for, I can even do it in a new tab just so I don't confuse things. There we go. So there's my patient details on Fred Flintstone, right? But I can just click the tab for specialties. And there I see the list of specialties. So now I've got all the data, right? But let me just point out the fact that this is dynamic. When we click these, it will go back and refresh the data, right? So for example, let me edit, well, let me just open a new tab, right? Going to patients, no, I'll just reassign. So right now, I'm looking at Gregory House, right? So I'm going to change Jane Doe here. We'll edit Jane Doe and assign her Gregory House as her doctor, her primary care physician. I'll save that change in this tab. Now it doesn't refresh automatically, but the next time I come back to patients, there we go. So Jane Doe has been added and we see her as a patient, right? I could add a specialty. Let's bring up the edit in a new tab for Gregory House. I'm going to add yet another specialty. I'll add a few. Maybe I'll add a bunch. Look at all those specialties. And then coming back to our details, next time I click specialties, they all show up, right? So there you go. So that's it's a very pleasant UI. People understand how to click the tabs naturally. There's no training required, and away they go. Now, the last thing in my PowerPoint, as I mentioned, if you want pills instead of the tabs across the top, so something that looks more like a button instead of a tab, it's only one quick little change. So let me go to Visual Studio. I don't even need to stop running. Go right up here to where we define our nav tabs. And I'll just change that to nav-pills. Okay, save that. Let's come back to the browser and I'll just refresh. And there we go. So now, if you like that effect better, that's entirely up to you. Actually, it's up to your end client. You can show them both and, charge them an extra $100 to change it. Oh, no, you don't want to be that mean. Okay, well, maybe you do. We all like to make money. All right, so that's it for now. That's the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoy this as a third approach that is easily implemented. And I really like this because it goes and gets only the data that's needed. So if you never need to, in the details, look at specialties, well, then you don't go and you load that data.